Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection in California with Dr. Jason Deitch. Jason, can you get us started by just reflecting on what it was that attracted you to becoming a chiropractor and where you were at in life, what was going on, and really what pulled you in this direction?
I can. What attracted me most to being a chiropractor was that it was really the most elegant understanding of life and health and physiology and um, how our bodies work, how health works, how life works that I had ever heard ever. It just made simple sense to me that we are all connected to a greater power that keeps this miracle of life happening. Uh, every child knows the brain controls and coordinates all functions of the body through the nervous system. Uh, Simple logic says that if there's interference to that system, something's not going to work the way it's supposed to work. And every doctor knows that health is not just the absence of symptoms, it is the optimization of function. It seems so simple and obvious to be able to put those ideas together, and yet somehow it's become uh, I guess I'll say up until recently, one of the most controversial conversations. There's others that have become more controversial recently, but it really was that elegant understanding of life and health and this, I guess you'll call it mission or purpose or sense of asking the question, why isn't this everywhere? Why doesn't everybody know about this? How could it be such a simple understanding, and yet why is there so much resistance to that idea? And I can't tell you why that sort of motivated me, inspired me, turned me on, but it has been certainly since I was about 8 years old or so that I learned it. Something inside of me got stirred, and it's become very much a life's mission and life's work to not just become a chiropractor, but help other chiropractors get the message out to the world. So we have a greater understanding and a more accurate understanding of how our bodies work and what it means to be healthy, and perhaps culturally what we can do to improve ourselves on what appears to be a pretty crazy course with destiny as we day by day wonder what could possibly happen next.
I remember being in the crowd at a seminar that you gave at Life West maybe 12 years ago, where you talked about how your wife was working at Facebook and you were able to gain some insights and see the potential, and that you used that opportunity. You actually went for it and you started to learn as much as you could about how chiropractic could participate on the internet in a way that, you know, the message of chiropractic, the principles of chiropractic could actually be discovered more so through the internet. So can you maybe just share a little bit about that time of life and how it's progressed to this time, and then we'll go back into your experiences as a student. I find that to be really interesting, and I know that you have a chiropractic family, but what you're up to these days, I believe, was started back about 12 years ago in the early days of Facebook, and you've stayed with that. And maybe you could just shine a light on what you've been able to participate in, and what you've been able to bring to the profession, and the impacts that you're witnessing chiropractic has been able to make because of your awareness.
Be happy to. My wife at the time, we're no longer married, but she was the first director of marketing at Facebook. I was in private practice in Oakland, California. Uh, I knew that I needed and wanted to do something bigger. I'd been inspired by mentors of both of ours, like Arnaud Bernier and many others. And my vision was, at the time, back in sort of, I guess, 2005, 2004, pre-Facebook, or I should say when it was started was in 2004, but before anybody really knew about it, before it had left college campuses, I had always been into understanding what is it that the world needs to hear and understand. And in those days, most people learned what they learned through books and the people they heard interviewed on the mainstream media. In order to get on mainstream media, you either needed to be, a politician, a criminal, or a best-selling author. And I figured I could do the last one. So I got to work writing a book. My, again, wife at the time said, I'll go back to work. You follow your dream, as whatever you want to call life, fate, destiny, luck, coincidence, who knows. She ended up getting an interview through a family friend of ours with this 18-year-old kid with this new company that nobody had heard of, but some were predicting that this thing might be something pretty big one day. She went through a series of interviews, met with Mark Zuckerberg, and became their first director of marketing. We left my practice in Oakland, moved down to Palo Alto, where I spent 2 years writing my book, and she spent 2 years working with Mark and Facebook. And that experience for me, both on the writing side and basically watching and seeing and hearing everything that was sort of going on, or everything I was privy to that was going on within social media. The simple conclusion, my background was marketing. I have a marketing degree from business school at Northeastern University and so on. My vision has always been, how do you get your message to the masses? No matter what it is that you're selling, teaching, inspiring, connecting, you've got to be able to communicate it effectively in order for people to want it. And it was just a fascinating experience. And I just sort of put together this to me, and my narrative of the story was, learning how to use the world's #1 social network to share the world's #1 best kept secret. And that is what I've been doing over the, I guess, decades now. It started off as a social media project. At first, the problem I was solving for was, how does the profession help more people know about what chiropractic is, become more curious about it, become more aware about it, get exposed to it. And that's what social media is great at, is helping ideas spread. What I learned over the years is that many chiropractors are much more in a state of survival than they are thrival, that they're more concerned with, getting more new patients in order to be able to pay their bills, keep a roof over their head, and, be personally successful than they were to try to save a profession or save the world. And so listening to the profession, figuring, what was going on, as you mentioned, what I'm up to these days, started as social media focused. And there was so much confusion within the chiropractic profession about, social media really being more about advertising than it was about creating messaging to teach and invite your audience on a consistent basis, that we've recently pivoted significantly to really be focused on email, automated email marketing campaigns, so that chiropractors do what they should be doing, which is keeping in touch with the people you've taken care of over the years. And obviously, if you're a pre-student or a student or a recent graduate, that may not yet apply to you. But what you'll find as you get into practice is that you take care of a lot of people, and many people come in, some people stay. And depending on who you are and what your processes are, how you teach and what you teach, a certain amount will stick around, but most of them will come and go. And that most chiropractors today, even the experienced ones, unfortunately find themselves, I guess the way I describe it is, addicted to needing new patients, always needing new patients. And if you've been in practice for more than a few years and you still always need new patients, the metaphor that we use is it's kind of like having a bucket with no bottom of the bucket and holes in the side. And so you can pour as much water you want to into the bucket, but if there's holes in the side and no bottom, then you will always need to pour water in the bucket. And that's the way, unfortunately, many chiropractors approach their practices, is that instead of, we call the holes basically being your retention, how do you make sure that when somebody starts care in your practice, they actually follow through with your care plan recommendations, whatever they may be, as opposed to using what they think would be the right way to determine if it's working or not working, which is based on how they feel. And unfortunately, if you leave them to do that, they're either going to feel better and leave or not feel better and leave. And unless you have more to the story, few of them will stick around. And that leaves chiropractors and the profession in this sort of chicken or the egg cycle of always needing more new patients, which leaves the profession in a survival mode without enough resources and vision and ability to really, I'll say, play offense. So we've pivoted our social media concept because chiropractors aren't trying to change the world at this point. They're trying to grow their practices at this point. we've recently shifted to the focus on automated email marketing campaigns in 3 specific categories. One, for people that go to your website, people have 2 choices. Either they call and make an appointment now, or they leave under the current circumstance. Our email system has one of those, everybody's seen them, those pop-up things that they say, before you leave, if you'd like to learn more, put in your name and email address, and that starts a whole series of emails that allows you to keep in touch with them over time, which is better than advertising, because now you can stay connected with people that actually went to your website and said they want to learn more for free. The second one is when people start care in your practice, you should have a automated sequence of emails that go out to all the people that start care in your practice. So you have a consistent message. You know that on day 1, you're saying, thanks for being a patient here. On day 3, you're saying, if you have any questions, let us know. But here's some of the frequently asked questions. On day 5, you can say, if you have any questions, and you want to know, why you are feeling better or not feeling better, ask us. And if you're having a great experience, please let us know. If you're not having a great experience, please let us know. And you can really create a consistent, what we think of as world-class onboarding experience to increase the percentage of people that start care and continue through care in your office. And the third place, just to complete the thought, and this is really where I'll say most of the money is for chiropractors that are trying to figure out, what's marketing? How do I get patients? Where do I make sure I'm making smart business moves? The answer really is in this third category. It's keeping in touch with the people that have been in to see you, whether they're staying active and or become inactive. Those are your we call most valuable patients. Those are the people that are most likely to go, oh, I didn't know that I'm supposed to continue to do that. Oh, I didn't know that if the pain goes away, that doesn't mean that the problem isn't fixed, and that I should continue to stay with it in order to really focus on correcting the problem. I didn't know that soreness is normal and common to expect, and that you didn't really hurt me. You were just actually doing the right thing, and I wasn't aware why I should continue. So having all of those email systems set up is really the foundation, in my opinion. Before you keep on trying to pour more water in the bucket, let's make sure that the holes on the bottom are as small as possible and the holes on the side are as patched up as possible as can be. So that's where it started, and that's what we're doing now, and that's why we're doing it.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing a deep dive there. I went down the rabbit hole with email storytelling through Andre Chaperone. He has something called auto marketing or autoresponder madness. He was known as the godfather of email marketing. And I signed up for one of his courses called Tiny is Mighty. And each week he would give you a really extensive blueprint as to like how these small, tiny businesses make such a mighty impact on the people that they come in contact with, because they're able to communicate and actually reach the person and get their message across through marketing emails. And there's closed loops and open loops based on what links people click in the email. So there is such a science to that, and I believe it is a fundamental skill in today's entrepreneur, which is how I'm contextualizing becoming a chiropractor these days. They are entrepreneurs. Even if they want to go become an associate, you have to think outside of being an employee and actually think about, how do I connect with the people that I'm taking care of? You did a great job of breaking down the different ways they can relate and connect messages that are foreign in a familiar way, and do so in a way where you segment the people's needs, you segment their interests, and you could do a whole class on that. So I really appreciate you going deep. And any students out there, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're inviting you to study email marketing and email automation as you're describing it. Can we take a little pause in that train of thought and just be nonlinear with our conversation, and you just go back to being that 8-year-old person? How would you advise a young person? They don't have to be 8 years old, although that would be a creative discussion, but how would you have a conversation with somebody at a younger age about how chiropractic can really be a vehicle that they can use to stay on purpose through their education? Nowadays, I just heard today there's medical magnets where a hospital will sponsor a high school and create internship opportunities for high school students to go do research or work in clinical settings. What can we do as a chiropractic profession to play offense, to provide opportunities for people at younger, earlier stages in the life cycle to really start to engage and connect and experience chiropractic?
Are you asking what can chiropractors do when they're earlier, or how do you reach people when they're younger?
If you were a guidance counselor at a middle school, a high school, a college, how would you be having conversations with people that are interested in this direction? Or how would you contextualize it for them?
You know, it all depends on what you're looking for in your career and if you're in your life. I heard it once said from many may know the great Fred Barge many years ago. He was an icon of our profession. I was fortunate enough, he taught our classes when I was at Life University. And he said, one really important thing to almost start the whole class off. And he said, you should never expect to get super rich, ultra wealthy being a chiropractor. And the reason is because we really have a service for humanity, which is different than a pill or a product that can be reproduced and scaled on an unlimited basis, or a shot for that matter, that could turn into billions of dollars in revenue. That there's certain limitations of your capacity to see a certain amount of people, serve a certain amount of people in a certain amount of time. And there's just a time of physics that you can only serve a certain amount of people. So one is to set your expectations that you really are, as you call, an entrepreneur. But again, my upbringing was through Life University, Dynamic Essentials, Dr. Sid Williams, many of the early icons in the profession. And the way Dr. Sid would always describe it was you really have to be somewhat, he didn't really use the term schizophrenic, but I'm going to use that term, in that you have to have what he referred to as your business hand and your service hand. And they shouldn't know what the other is doing. In other words, you've got to think like an entrepreneur. That's true. You've got to pay your bills. You've got to be able to earn enough money to be able to take care of yourself and your family, and be generous and give back to the profession and invest in other students and help the profession grow. You need to have a good, I don't want to say business mind, because that sounds so broad. People, I don't know anything about business. I'm a chiropractor. They don't teach us about business in chiropractic school. That's all overrated. What you need to know about business is that more money needs to come in than goes out. That's business, okay? It doesn't have to be that much more complex than that. The service hand is really where, most would call it marketing, but there's many chiropractors limit marketing to advertising, whereas marketing really is being passionate about getting your message to as many people as possible. And going back to sort of previously, we've sort of coined the term with email, that the philosophy really is TIC, tick. You can't forget it. Teach and invite consistently. If you think about teaching people something on a consistent basis, and remember to always include an invitation, in marketing terms, that's called a call to action, and you do that consistently, your results will be commensurate with how often you're teaching and how many invitations you're giving people. So I think if I was a guidance counselor, I would be checking out, is this somebody that's all about the money, and that you're just looking to do anything, sell anything, because they're just really focused on the material world and accumulating as much financially as you can? This may not be the best profession if that's your sole focus and your primary motivation. But for those people that appreciate the ability to work for themselves, which is the good news and the bad news. The good news is I get to do whatever I want to do. The bad news is if something's going to happen, it's up to me to do it. So for those people that are interested in being generous with their time, generous with their life, they want to be of service to other people that can benefit from their help, that appreciate making a good living and understanding that, you're not going to necessarily be the next Elon Musk or ultra billionaire necessarily doing this, but you certainly can make a great living taking care of your family, being generous in your community. It is a wonderful profession. To answer your question one step deeper, I guess, just to coincidentally, this book over my shoulder right here, this is a way to actually reach people when they're even younger. And that is a book I wrote actually before I went to chiropractic, pre-chiropractic school, called Why Should I Go to the Chiropractor? And it's an A to Z rhyming book. You can find it on Amazon. You can go to whyshouldIgotothechiropractor.com. And it is a way that we're now teaching chiropractors to hold events in their practice called Story Time with Our Chiropractor. You go to storytimeevents.com to learn more about that. but it's to address exactly what you're asking, Ben. It is, how do you reach people earlier and earlier and earlier in their lives? So like me, when I heard it when I was 8 years old, I grew up thinking this was normal. This was a good idea. And the earlier kids can start learning, wait a minute, what's this chiropractic thing? You know, I have the power to heal myself. Of course, the brain is what's responsible for coordinating all the functions of my body. I want to be a chiropractor. I want to learn more about it. I want to get adjusted. That will help more and more people in future generations, I guess, normalize what I guess is sort of natural and normal. So I hope that answers what you're asking.
Absolutely. It's a creative question and a creative prompt. I appreciate you giving it your shot. And I felt like I was the student listening to you in the guidance counseling session, which was the whole intention behind the question. So if we're pivoting now to like a college student who's already focused on pre-chiropractic, they know they want to go to chiropractic school, and they've learned the foundation, the fundamental principles, they've studied what is chiropractic, why do people become chiropractors, what are the different pathways that exist, and they've gone and they've gained experience in an office, they've gotten adjusted, they've observed people getting cared for, they've observed the back end systems, as you've mentioned. Now they're being invited to go and start their own pre-chiro club on their college campus. I was wondering if you could maybe just give them some words of encouragement. Maybe they're just getting started with their pre-chiro club, or maybe they already have one that's been functioning for a few quarters or semesters now. How would you maybe just support and just guide a student's club or a pre-chiro club to get the most out of the experience and to really make the most impact on their campus?
There's a couple things I'll answer that with. Number one, I don't mean this the way this may sound to some, but stay humble. And what I mean by that is I was guilty when I was in school of knowing a lot of things because I just learned them and I knew them. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And there is an attitude of, especially, around students as they get later in their years. I taught at Life West for several years. I taught first quarter students chiropractic philosophy. I taught last quarter students business skills for when they graduate. And there was a big difference between the day they started and the days they were leaving. And in the days they were leaving, they stopped being open to learning new ideas and things. They had figured it out by that point. And they knew everything they knew. They just didn't know what they didn't know. And that's really, I've heard it said that it's what you learn after you know it all that's most important. So one is I would stay humble. Two, there was a framework that I learned, I think it was after I graduated, that had I learned it sooner would have been more helpful to the point of your question. I think late friend Frank Savinsky, no longer with us, worked with Michael Gerber to create a book called The E-Myth Chiropractor's Edition. And to break down the concept of the E-Myth, the entrepreneurial myth by Michael Gerber, the framework there was a game changer for my understanding, and it was something I wished I'd known earlier, maybe even as a student. And in a nutshell, what he teaches is that there's really three parts to having a successful business or successful practice. And those three parts are really important to understand because the entrepreneurial myth, the E-myth, is that the person who's doing all the work is the one who should be making all the money. So in the book, they refer to it as a watchmaker who's a technician. They have a skill. They know how to fix watches. And it's the person who's fixing watches that's doing all the work, supposedly, but making the least amount of money at the watch repair business. And the myth is that, well, I'm the one with the skill. I'll go start my own business because I'm the one who knows how to fix the watches. I should be the one making all the money. And what the myth is all about is understanding that the technician is only 1/3 of the equation. Whether you're a chiropractor, a lawyer, a medical doctor, an accountant, whatever it may be, your skill, your trade of time for money, my time, my skill to do something is 1/3 of the equation. It's the other 2/3 that are important to either understand how to build those skill sets yourself and or find the right partners or people you can hire to make sure that those skill sets are being handled. And sometimes the chiropractor is better at these other things than they are at the actual skill itself. And that's when doctors hire associates or have satellite practices, etc. The two other parts are the entrepreneur, which is technically the person who's growing the business on a regular basis, who's teaching and inviting consistently, that's out in the community doing presentations and talks and speeches, that's networking with other groups and organizations or other professions to create connection, create relationships, and not just prove why you're right, but actually understand that people do business with people they like, that we don't all act rationally. We don't read, the truth and all of a sudden just follow it. We all have our versions of the truth in some respects. And who that message comes from matters more than what the message is, because people don't know how to decipher right from wrong, but they do know I can trust him, I can trust her. That's my guide. That's the person who I respect. And what they tell me is what I accept as truth. And it's an important distinction to make. So technician is one side, entrepreneur is another side, and the third side is the manager. It is knowing, the details of how do I make sure I'm signing a lease the right way, and I pay all my bills, and I pay my taxes, and I keep the office open, and all the HR laws and human resource and employee issues you've got to take care of and make sure that you know of. Those are three very different and yet all necessary components to running a successful business. Know yourself well enough to know what you're great at, what you love doing, but also know how to make sure that you are finding and working with people that can help wear those other hats in your business, and make sure you don't be fooled into thinking, like many of us, that the person who's doing the adjusting is the one that has all the value in the business. The adjustment is what you get to do if the other things are working right. If the other things aren't working right, you don't have people to work with or a place to do the work in. And unless you're on a mission trip somewhere where the money and the environment and the context doesn't really matter, it's going to be much more difficult to run a successful business, at least here in the United States.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and getting students to think about their own club as their own practice. There's so many parallels there, and I love how you just unpacked all the different details that go into being somebody who's a small business owner, a chiropractor, a healer, a person that people can relate to and think that they can trust. Anyway, so pivoting just a little bit. So you've written a couple of books, you've designed a number of different courses, you've been a teacher. If students are developing that inner teacher within to stop seeing themselves so much as the student and morphing themselves into the teacher, are there any mindsets that you enter into, say, a new project, or you find new inspiration and you start to think of yourself, or you do a lot of the legwork to learn and grow and develop your understanding to the point where you can now go and practice teaching this maybe on a basic level, an intermediate and an expert level? I'm just wondering if you can unpack a little bit of the teacher within, because I think that being a chiropractor really has a lot to do with being a teacher.
It does. And the mistake that many people make is that they think we've got to teach people about chiropractic. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Of course, you've got to teach them about chiropractic, but teaching people about chiropractic needs to be, in my opinion, secondary to teaching people about their bodies, how they work, how to understand physiology, how to understand the definition of what it means to be healthy. Because people have a prejudice, a prejudgment, and understanding, a worldview that they've learned through mainstream media, through their doctor, through their parents, through the experience we all just went through, that just teaching them about chiropractic does not help them understand how this really works within the context of their life and their lifestyle. So it really is important for people to understand some of the basics. The power that made the body has the power to heal the body, that we have an innate ability to heal ourselves. We have an immune system. We have self-healing capacity and capabilities that we're all doing every day, all day. And those are some of the foundational ideas that I think are the foundations to, misalignment of the vertebra, putting pressure on nerve will interfere with your function and therefore your ability to be as healthy as possible. getting good at connecting with people, teaching people, and I'll dare go into the category of doing it in a way that doesn't make them stupid or wrong for believing the things that they believe, which a lot of times we forget. Again, early on, the contrast of first quarter, people are open-minded, they're curious, they're here, they're excited. A couple years later, and what I would tell my first quarter students, and I'll tell all of you right now, is don't get too smart. And what I mean by that is we forget how normal people talk, how normal people think. And as you get more educated and you get smarter, you forget that people don't know these expensive, long, multi-syllable words. They want to understand the simple basics and the concepts more than they do want to understand how smart you are or how smart you think you are. So understanding really how to connect with people, communicate with people in an inspiring way that encourages them to want to learn more, I think is one of the important things to remember, that there's a difference between teaching and inspiring people to want to learn more. And those are two different things. I would stand in front of a class of chiropractic students and I'd say the same thing to all of them, but in no way does that guarantee that anybody learned anything. I taught, that doesn't mean they learned. And so making sure that we're focused on the outcome, which is, what do I need to say? Who do I need to be? How do I need to show up? What context do I need to be in? What validation do they need in order to want to learn more for their benefit, which is a very different consciousness than I want to get up there and tell everybody what I know, how right I am, how much research there is that supports my righteousness. And we talk at people more than we do inspire them to want to come our way and learn more. And it's just an important thing for, I think, all chiropractors to keep in mind, is not to get too smart, to stay connected with people and give people the ability to want to learn more from you and trust that you're telling them the truth without having to tell them the entire story within a few minutes. Otherwise, you don't think you get a second chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an amazing message right there. There's so much diversity emerging in our profession of different people from different backgrounds that it's really fascinating to listen to different interpretations of chiropractic being communicated through these different social media channels. I'm just curious for you to maybe give any insight into the prompts that you were asking of students that can help them align better with who they truly are. A lot of us lose ourselves in the process of being in a graduate level program that demands so much of us. It's requiring us to take test after test and regurgitate a way of thinking that may not be fully congruent with who we knew ourselves to be before we got there. I'm just wondering, because one of the last parts of the pre-Chiro experience is to invite creative study, independent study. Any way that you can encourage a student to go on a 3 to 6 month journey to truly root deeply into who they are and stand firmly in that, no matter what happens in school, it doesn't knock them off their center, or maybe it'll knock them off their center, but they at least know what their center was so that they can come back to it?
That's a really great question. What comes up for me is a couple things. I find myself saying this more and more these days. I'll say it again here. And the saying is, compared to what? And what I mean by that in this particular context is I was in school, chiropractic school. I taught in chiropractic school. I've done a lot of work with, students and graduates. And I guess the simple way of saying it, there's a lot of complaining that goes on, and I did it plenty myself. I was guilty of it back then. I'm only sharing now through reflection and experience. And there's this sense of, I can't wait to get out of here so I can, it'll be easier when I graduate. It'll be easier when I get my license. It'll be easier when I pass my boards. It'll be easier, at some point in the future. And it's not in most cases. There is an understanding of what phase of my life am I in and what is the goal during this phase of my life. In school, you are specifically there to, first and foremost, Learn what you need to learn in order to pass your boards, in order to get a license, in order to get out and provide a service and make a living providing that service. That really is the goal. Law schools don't necessarily teach how to run successful law firms. They don't. You learn about law and how to pass the bar and how to get your license, so you can then learn how to run a successful practice at some point in the future. So the complaining doesn't usually help. There's a specific goal in school to get through it with as positive as an attitude as you possibly can. Your question about how do you kind of discover yourself, find yourself, and so on, that's a question all of us should be asking at all stages of our life. But specifically when you're starting off, there's a tendency, just sort of generally looking at how it tends to work, that we tend to follow in the footsteps of whoever our field doctor or mentor doctor was. And so we think about who they were, what inspired us about what they did, and then we want to do what they did and what they do. And sometimes that's a wonderful thing, but sometimes it's not. And so it is really having a kind of a sober look at what you're getting yourself into, and what the implications of that are. So there's a difference, for example, being in downtown San Francisco with extremely high rents, with mostly business people, depending on where you are in a major city, high employee expenses, where your costs of running a business are much different than if you're somewhere, in middle America, in a suburb. And your ability to run a successful business and not have the stress that goes along with it oftentimes is commensurate with kind of where you are. If you could do what you did and not need the money or not think about the money, you have an ability to come to it with a different spirit than if you're constantly financially stressed out about things. And so there is something to paying attention to what drives you. The goal should be that what drives you is to be of the most service to as many people as you possibly can. That should be, in my opinion, what is the driving force for any health professional, including chiropractors, that your focus is on their best interest and what you can do to help them achieve their goals and their outcomes, which is not really how healthcare works in America these days, anywhere in healthcare. Most of the times it comes back to, well, I can bill for this. Why shouldn't I? I get reimbursed for it. They'll pay for it. I might as well do it. It's legal. My license will let me. So I might as well, because somewhere there's an economic benefit or incentive to it. So there's something to just really coming to terms with what drives you, what motivates you, and how do you keep yourself in as low stress of a state as possible, so that you can express yourself, you can stay true to your focus and your values, you can actually be who you want to be. Because when people are under financial stress, I think everybody's probably experienced that at some point. I'm not in stress, I can do whatever I want, and I'm happy and I'm excited and I'm generous. I am in financial stress, and even though that's who I am, I can't really afford to show up that way right now because I'm the one in need. It's similar to, I guess, what they say, on airplanes, put your oxygen mask on first before you help everybody else. The best way to be of service to others is not to be needy yourself. And needy looks like making care plan recommendations based on insurance reimbursement versus what somebody actually needs, or providing extra bonus services because they pay really well and people need it anyway. And it's a good thing, even though it may not have anything to do with what being a chiropractor really is all about. And I'm not placing judgment on doing more than that. I'm just saying, if you're going to do it because you really believe in it and you think it's the right thing to do, and you think it's a good thing for humanity, and try to limit your need or ability to constantly be driven by the money. The more you can decrease your financial need and keep yourself in a state of abundance, in a state of generosity, then you get to express who you really are. And then it's a lifelong journey. I'm 30 plus years into it and I'm still figuring out who I am and so on. I don't think you ever get there. So it is what drives you. What drives you before marriage may change after marriage, which may change after kids, which may change after kids get older, which may change after they graduate. Yes, there's commonalities, but circumstances change sometimes as well. And the goal, I think, for all chiropractors is to enjoy it, to love it, to love doing what you do because you know the impact it has on other people, and you don't have to do it because you're the one in need. You can truly serve, as I've learned, out of a state of abundance.
Yeah, so much of that to me was about capacity building. If you need to look 5 feet in front of you, your capacity is only to see those next 5 feet. But if you can see that you have that covered, then you can see 5, 10, 20 steps ahead. There's so much going on nowadays, so much change being driven by technology. And as somebody who is watching patterns, as chiropractors, we often observe patterns. And that's something that you've noted multiple times in this conversation, that you've observed a pattern and you saw that there was maybe a subluxation or an obstruction to the full expression of whatever was there. It wasn't expressing itself fully. Let's just use chiropractors in practice as an example, or communication with people that come into practices as an example. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is how can we remove the obstructions that are preventing our students from having that clarity, having that sort of certainty that they're on the right path because they've done the work. We don't have an MCAT. I'm not proposing that we create a CCAT for an admissions requirement, but if we were going to have some minimum standards that removed some of these obstructions that are resulting in students dropping out of school for realizations that this wasn't their right path after they'd already been in school for a while, or if students fail out of school because they weren't fully ready or they didn't know that school was really hard and challenging in an academic way. I'm just curious if you could maybe walk down that path with me. If you were the designer of, my premise is that our profession's primary subluxation, we talk about the birth trauma. Our students coming into chiropractic schools are not really clear on what chiropractic is, and they haven't experienced it fully, and they haven't studied it in depth. So I think we can set students on the right path if we're clear with them as to, how they can really set themselves up to have a great, rich experience in school. I'm just wondering if you have some thoughts on that.
I do. My premise has always been somewhat different than a lot of my colleagues and even mentors on what my interpretation of what you're asking. And my premise is that until we create enough demand in the public setting for who we are and what we do, until people look at chiropractors as, metaphorically like rock stars, like I love my chiropractor, and there's a percentage that do, but most do not. Most don't even understand it. If they do, I hear it over and over. We all do. Oh, I'm lucky I don't need one. It's just nonsense. People, generally speaking, just don't have an understanding in the public of what we do. And I think that, to me, is the drive. That is what I think of as the subluxation, because people are willing to do hard things if they know there's a good outcome or payoff or benefit to getting through it and doing it. It's doing the hard things only to end up in a place that's even harder and doesn't necessarily have the reward, or at least have the perception of that. That I think is why some people go, this isn't what I signed up for. Everybody I talk to doesn't go, wow, you're going to be a chiropractor. They go, wow, you're going to be a chiropractor? It's that kind of, I think, socialization that I think crushes many chiropractors' spirits. I don't think anybody goes to a professional school or any type of, ongoing education after college thinking this is going to be easy, or I don't have to be smart, or I don't have to be qualified, or I'm not going to have to put forth effort. That should come with the territory as an expectation. But it's when they go, I'm not going to go through all of this, take on all this debt, spend the opportunity costs of 3, 4, 5 years, only to then start with debt to then get into something that doesn't seem to be something that will be fun, successful, rewarding, both financially and emotionally, stable, all of the different things that come with being in healthcare all the way around. This is not for chiropractors exclusively. The whole healthcare system, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much a mess. I think those are some of the deeper problems and issues. And I think when the public gets onto, wait a minute, why doesn't everybody know this? Shouldn't everybody be going to a chiropractor? Isn't that what we should be mandating, is making sure people are as healthy as possible, as clear neurologically as possible, that maybe there's incentives for people doing the right thing, whether it's watching what they eat or exercising or stress, having less stress in their lives. There are ways in which we can leverage our policies, our economics, our procedures culturally to be more aligned with what's right. And if there was more of that, then chiropractors would, I think, have a higher perception of value and esteem that I think would encourage more students to stick with it and be enthusiastic about it. I think people are willing to do hard work if they know there's a benefit when they get out of it. I'm sure there's exceptions. I didn't think it was this hard. I don't have the capacity, or whatever the issues may be. I'm sure that's a legitimate thing. The overwhelming majority of what I've seen is, they thought they were getting into something that they could make a good living at, and they just find it's constantly a struggle, or there's prejudice, or it's harder to get people to, believe in chiropractic than they thought, and they give up. And it's in some respects understandable. It's disappointing, but it's understandable. We don't live in a perfect world quite yet. Maybe naturally it's perfect, but it's a struggle for humans.
And a lot of what I hear you discussing are the effects of our system, our structures that we've created through design, through human thoughts, through educated intelligence. If we're going back and boiling it down, though, a lot of our experiences through our educational experiences and our process of becoming chiropractors can be boiled down to a series of pivotal experiences that really inspired us from within to recognize the power that we have, the impacts that we can make. And it was really just a sense of empowerment that we were able to experience from different moments in time. And so if I'm talking solution oriented, if I'm talking about addressing the cause, I'm talking about providing opportunities for students in new moments of their life cycle to have these really rich and rewarding experiences, to start a club that creates a legacy that they started, that they can go out to their college campus, their fellow students, and inspire healthy living choices, or share with people ways that they're living a more aligned lifestyle, right? There's different creative prompting and just nudging of students that can take place that will give us new results, that will have a new consciousness of the new incoming wave of students, to have like shared experiences. Every chiropractic student going in is aware of what other chiropractic students have done before they went to chiropractic school, because we've reached a tipping point of having a sort of pre-chiro shared experience standard. I'm just trying to share with you that yes, I'm right there with you, and I think that you illustrate very eloquently exactly why people become disenchanted and how our systems are failing the students, and how students are limited in their sort of vision because they haven't been given a bigger vision for themselves. So I'm just curious if you can continue. You used one example there of a solution that you had, which is to incentivize healthy behaviors. I think that that's brilliant, and I think if that was embedded into our policies, that would make a huge impact. I'm more curious of like these educated populations of people, whether they're going into healthcare or they're an engineering major going into auto mechanics, but their college campus has invested in pre-chiropractic, the culture that it represents how can we impact this next generation through chiropractic, but coming from new voices, not me or you, but the younger students that are really passionate and experienced and inspired to make a difference themselves before they even get to chiropractic school?
So we have this wonderful thing called social media and social networks, and there's a lot of negative talk and what I think a lot of bad press about it. I happen to think it's the absolute best tool our profession could have ever asked for. Prior to the internet, social media, social networks, our message was completely limited to go out through mainstream media, television, mainstream magazines, newspapers, and nobody was letting us through. So, when I say compared to what the opportunities we have now are infinitely endless compared to the opportunities we had in previous generations. With that said, I'll add the context, and that is, I don't remember who said it, but the idea, it would get very frustrating to try to boil the ocean. Just never going to happen. You're never going to reach your goal. However, you could take some water and you could boil some water. And I use that as another example. Seth Godin, a famous sort of marketer and so on, would also say the same thing, that if you were to take purple dye, for example, and put it into the ocean, you'd never see a change and you'd think, this doesn't work. I'm not doing anything. But if you took a cup of that water and you put your purple dye in, you could see change. And that metaphor is, I guess, what I'm going to encourage others to think and do, which is find your container of people that you can influence and make a difference in. And don't think of it as changing the universe, changing the world, changing, 7-8 billion people. Who are the people you can reach, you can impact, whether it's through social media and social networks, that you can do videos, write blogs, do podcasts, just as you're doing here right now. How can you share your message? And when I say your message to people about how powerful they are, not how great chiropractic is, not how terrific a chiropractor is, but how powerful people are to heal themselves, how capable people are to do great things, how amazing it is for people to heal from conditions that previously kept them infirmed, that they now have healed themselves and can get their lives back and make a difference in other people's lives. How powerful they are to do more than just get by or complain or suffer or just deal with it, made it through. The more people, chiropractors, pre-chiropractors, passionate, generous, kind people who care, the more you can use these tools to make a positive difference in other people, they will continue to want to learn more from you and about you. And when that occurs, you have then earned the ability to share with them more about the ways in which they can achieve that power, the way they can achieve greater expression of who they are. And it just so happens that in many cases, one of, not the only, but one of the best ways for people to express their personal power, as Tony Robbins would talk about, as Deepak Chopra and many others would talk about, which verifies my point that there are non-chiropractors teaching people about how powerful they are that are extremely popular, extremely successful, and I'll dare even say extremely rich. And they do it because they're teaching people about themselves as opposed to teaching people about what you sell. And so with that framework in mind, that teach and invite consistently format, remembering that doctor means teacher, that the goal should be to connect with people and inspire them first so that you earn the ability to put your hands on them, make adjustments, clear subluxations second, not the other way around. That, I think, is one of the major differences that many chiropractic students, pre-chiropractic students, can make. As I said, coincidentally, I wrote that book prior to even applying to chiropractic school because it was a vision, it was an idea. That was pre-internet, pre-anything. I literally did it, by hand. The ability that people have right now graphic design skills, publishing skills, Amazon, social media, podcasting. It almost hurts my heart every single day that there are not more chiropractor creators teaching and inviting consistently, sharing the message with humanity about how powerful they are. That is the opportunity I think that we all have. And I hope younger people who don't have major overhead that they've got to just sort of suffer through whatever's necessary to pay the bills can afford to actually tell the truth and build those skills and habits early, build those audiences over time, because they do take time. That may be, I think, one of the great opportunities as time goes on.
Thank you so much for taking the time this morning or this afternoon to really share and pour into students out there. This was a really rich conversation. There's so much to unpack. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any final last 30-second messages that you want to just share in case people want to find you online or connect with you deeper? Just thank you so much. And the pre-Chiro students will benefit from your wisdom in the future, I hope.
You can find me at thesmartchiropractor.com. We have links to our podcast, to our blogs, to our social channels, to our products, to our free giveaway information, and so on. So thesmartchiropractor.com. You can connect with me on obviously most of the social channels. We have private groups on Facebook. Listen, this is an adventure. It's not just a job; it's an adventure, as they say. The goal is to keep your eye on the ball. And the ball is to show up the best version of who you are so you can be of most service to as many people as possible. And rinse and repeat each and every day. I remind myself of that every day. I'll share it with everybody else. We are here to make a positive difference in people's lives, not just to suffer through all the problems that come our way. And when we keep our eye on the ball and focus and truly have the ability with our hands, with our heart, with our head, to use these tools, literally, as we're doing right now, to positively spread inspiration, information, knowledge, and direction to help people make the right choices. Who knows? Maybe the world will be a better place because of all we've done.